Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Through the Pages. Today I'm visiting an author who longtime viewers of the channel have heard me review on here before, Michael Pollan, and his latest This Is Your Mind on Plants. So this very well might be my favorite book from him, and not solely because of the subject, but because I thought the writing was just outstanding. His last one from 2018, How to Change Your Mind, will probably go down as his biggest book, or like most seminal book, I would say, most impactful book. And this is kind of an offshoot of it without having the same motive of trying to get people to understand the value in these substances. That one, was a mix of his own personal use and kind of the clinical forefront. But this book really takes on three substances, caffeine, opium, and peyote. Delighted to say I've experience with all three, and so this was an incredibly satisfying read, and I really liked his approach to all three. So caffeine, he recognized, it's impossible to write about it until you understand it, and if you're a daily user and have been forever, you'll understand it more by subtracting it from your life. And so he did that for, I think it was 30 days. And he had quite a caffeine habit going in, I'll say. So I believe he said he would start every day with a cup of half-calf coffee, which I didn't recognize was really used so much. And then green tea all throughout the day, and sometimes a cappuccino after lunch. I stopped using caffeine maybe 2 years ago. And I hear that regimen and I'm just like, good Lord, I would be off the fucking walls. So it makes me think there's a lot of people that are probably not too far from that, considering soda is heavily in caffeine and seeing how much soda my coworkers drink. So I would like to see a society less based around caffeine. He does touch on that it is very helpful to capitalism, and it was brought about or really ingrained in our society, both from the health benefits of it was healthier than water because it was boiled in a time when water was sketchy, but really workers demanding a coffee break and saying if you let us take this break and use that drug, we'll come back better workers. And capitalism was that we'll bet on that, it works. And so I also think that's why we see kind of a rise of alcohol, because caffeine all day and needs something to knock down at night, and that also plays into capitalism very well. But for more on that, check out my last book review of 17 Contradictions and the End of Capitalism by David Harvey. But so this book, aside from just delving into a shared view of caffeine, it's a very insightful view of peyote and a very unique view of opium. And what I liked most about this book that I mentioned before was his writing in it. Going into it, I was I don't necessarily just want a 60-page essay on these substances. I don't, I've learned about them. I've learned about peyote for this book, which he references, Mescaline by Mike J. I reviewed this back when I was doing monthly episodes where I would just review all the books I read in a month. And it's very informative, but I will say just straight history, even on something as wild as peyote, after a while, it's just not my jam. But this was a very personal, his experience with them and kind of their state, but also unique stories. So with the opium, it wasn't about the opiate epidemic or any of that, the kind of the same tropes you would imagine. That was adjacent, but it was more about his experience growing poppies and then realizing oh, what I've just done is super illegal. How worried should I be? And a friend getting arrested for that, and kind of the unique state of it being a very important thing on the DEA's to-do list or to monitor list, but not something they wanted to make a big noise about because then it would alert more people to it. That growing these poppies is pretty easy in your yard, and then to turn that into opium is also not difficult. So he was kind of exploring that and recognizing like, oh man, if I write about this and spread that and crack it open, that's a problem. That's when they'll get it, because right now they're trying to stamp it out without making a big dust from stamping. You know what I mean? So it was really interesting to kind of see that like cranny he was in there. Also the time period and just how real it was. You know, dealing with seed dealers, because he, you know, is a very avid gardener, and recognizing like, oh, some of them are saying we can't get this anymore, we're not allowed to sell that anymore. And so it was interesting, and I really enjoyed his analysis of peyote, both the kind of traditional peyote, the little buttons, and then the big San Pedro cactus. It's the one that I dabbled with twice, and I think it's a very important plant. I won't go into my personal story because that's a whole video unto itself, but I like the recognition that it's getting in an age where it feels like when people say plant medicine, they say ayahuasca. It's like there's more than just that, and so I do think peyote is super important, and the kind of avenue he got onto it was like the legality, and even like talking about, you know, tribes being able to use it versus white people trying to kind of co-opt that freedom. Was it the decriminalized nature movement, who like Native Americans pretty much asked like, hey, we like what you're doing, but the emphasis on peyote is kind of putting a lot of light onto something that's very scarce, and we need it for our communities. And they basically said like, nah, we're keeping peyote on our logo, we're pushing for it big time, and drawing attention to this thing where they said, man, we don't want more people in on this. So it was interesting to see the intersection of traditional use versus like modern day hope for use, or use, or whatever you would call it. But yeah, it's a tricky one, I will say. Like, if it ever went extinct because of overuse, the guilt would ride specifically on white people, and I don't think we need to do any more things that cause us guilt. We have a laundry list of crimes already, so it was a very welcomed perspective, because I think that should get out there more. You want peyote? Grow it. Wait, and 15 years down the road you got it. Otherwise you're pillaging from someone else. And so this, or if someone takes you in and lets you enjoy what they're growing. But it was just so well written. Like, I don't have a lot to say on the book, because it's not a subject matter that I see as really contentious, and he didn't dive into any like bold claims on anything, or saying like these are medicinal value, this is going to do this, that, the other. Like, he really just was like putting plain Jane, like, this is what these substances do, and this is kind of where they're at in our society right now. Or in the case of the opium, it's like a 25-year-old essay, but still holds true. But yeah, for everything I've read of Michael Pollan, it's all behind me, so I'll just turn around. But yeah, like fifth book from him. And writing wise, my favorite. How to Change Your Mind will probably always be my favorite, because it was such a surprising pivot, and he is in that unique position. He's so respect, and had that like even Netflix documentary on his like cooked stuff, and I think outside of like Obama or something that was someone so prominent, like I feel like he was able to drive a wedge into the understanding or the acceptance of these, unlike anyone else could do, because he's such a trusted voice. The downside of that is that this is a thicky book that I think a lot of people won't go for, or went for and didn't finish. I ate that up. I loved it. Like, and if he put out like a sequel to it, I would read it instantly. But I think this expands his understanding of substances and society in a really fascinating way. I learned a lot from it without having like facts jammed down my throat. Like it kind of what I spoke to in the review I just did a minute ago, listening to Ecstasy. It wasn't just like a summary of the forefront of clinical research, which is fascinating, but it also is changing all the time and sometimes isn't as approachable, where this just shows how these substances are a part of our lives, especially caffeine. Pretty much everyone I know uses it or has used it in some way. So you can't really write these books off as like, oh, those are for drug users. It's like, we're all drug users. And this kind of breaks down that barrier in a really good way. But yeah, I honestly feel like if someone asked like best representation of Michael Pollan's writing, I would probably give them this book. I also like whenever I can read something that's current, like this just came out of like June 6th this year. So go find it at your local indie bookstore. Don't order it off Amazon. Yeah, definitely going to have more Michael Pollan on here. The next one I want to read is Botany of Desire. I have read, along with this is Your Mind on Plants, read these ones. If you think there's any other place I should go, let me know. Otherwise, shoot me a thumbs up. Give me a subscribe. I appreciate any support, any digital way of you saying, hey Joe, I watched this video. You can even just leave it at that. Like, it's nice to know that you enjoyed it. That's a bonus, but like, just knowing you're out there is pretty neat.